This next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from James in Morehead City, North Carolina. Who has had the biggest influence on the wrestling business historically? Eric Bischoff or Paul Heyman? Heyman obviously remains influential to this day, and ECW influenced an entire generation of wrestlers and fans, but Bischoff was the only one to ever truly take it to Vince on a national level and help bring the more athletic cruiserweight style fully into the mainstream of American wrestling. All things considered, which one has had the biggest impact on the business as we look back now in 2021?
Not saying whether that impact was positive or negative, Heyman.
Right, and that is a big point. You're not saying positive or negative, but who has really impacted the business the most?
Yes, and of course we say he's a genius performer. He's the most brilliant thespian involved in the business today. He's an amazing orator, great promos, always says the right thing, has a knack for putting together the big matches. But the impact or the influence that he had was a lot of what you just said. People wanting to emulate the ECW wrestlers. And unfortunately, as we talked about on the Experience this past weekend, unfortunately not picking a lot of the right ones to want to emulate. And we got a lot more Sandmans than we got, Eddie Guerreros. And we got a lot more, the death match. That's what they took away. The people who really got into ECW and wanted to become wrestlers as a result of it, or, in some way get involved in the business, it seems like it's all the violence and the goofiness and the lack of rules and the chaos that they wanted to emulate. Bischoff had a tremendous impact at the time in terms of he was doing business at dwarfed ECWs, and he was the only one that ever got competitive with Vince neck to neck since Crockett in the 80s, and it was a whole different business then, and Vince wasn't as big. So, but that was at that time. Would it have happened? Did it happen when there was even somebody else in that chair? Because Bischoff over those 3 years was gone, a few times on company mandated breaks, shall we say. He's the one that did beat the opposition in the ratings for the 83 weeks that he likes to talk about. But at the same time, he's also the one that spent money like a drunken sailor and signed all those guys up to contracts that even with Turner Home Entertainment paying the big stars and it not coming off the WCW books when their business tanked, it was a free fall. A wrestling promotion had never to that point, and, it never has again, unless we get into looking at AEW's early books, gone $60 million in the hole in 12 months. Paul Lee's bankruptcy was not nearly that spectacular. Did Bischoff have a lasting impact on the business? Not really, because, yes, that happened. But it would have happened with somebody else probably approximately the same way, somebody else in that chair, because it was Turner's money until they got tired of spending it. He briefly made them some. But everybody talks about the Cruiserweights, and we got to see the Cruiserweights in WCW. People don't remember with hindsight that at the time that was the same subset of wrestling fans, maybe larger numbers, but the same percentage of the overall audience. That's the AEW fans. They just wanted to see the work and the spots, and they didn't care what the guys looked like or whether they could talk or not. They just wanted to see the gymnastics in the ring. And, that today people remember, oh, yeah, they introduced the Cruiserweights. At the time, did the Cruiserweights... were they ever put in a position to draw any money in WCW, and did they ever? And the answer to both questions is no. And they were never featured. They were on television, and it was the same subset of fans that watch AEW for all the gymnastics now. It was the same kind of thing, that the people there, they didn't want silly, phony wrestling, but they liked the technical movement and all the dives and everything. But it wasn't an earth-shaking, fucking deal. And again, though, the wrestlers that watched WCW from that era, they all wanted to be luchadors instead of being the main event guys. And so they started flying, and that's why all the independent guys started flying. The garbage wrestlers got into garbage wrestling because everybody could be the drunk guy hitting you with a kendo stick. And all the 175-pound guys that practiced on their trampolines got into wrestling because they could do all those flips. But nobody, I won't say nobody, very few guys wanted to emulate the guys in the main events that were actually drawing all the money in either company. So Paul's legacy is longer lasting, in my opinion. Impact, legacy, whatever you want to call it, because that style of wrestling has lasted to this day, whereas Bischoff was only one of the people that was introducing. You saw cruiserweights in WCW, but you could see that in other places as well and in other promotions, just not on national TV at the time. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this. When you watch AEW, and we know Tony Khan was a big ECW fan, and Tony Khan paid a lot of attention to WCW Nitro, what do you see on AEW as the bigger influence? WCW or ECW?
Well, with the style, even WCW in the 90s didn't do just furniture garbage matches multiple times per show and fighting outside the ring and in the crowd for minutes at a time, did they? I've tried to put a lot of that stuff out of my mind.
There were a few brawls, but it wasn't like match after match. I tuned out after 1999, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he's trying to do everything, and that's part of the problem. Everybody always says, it would be great to have a promotion where you have a buffet of styles, and if you don't like something here, then the next match. No. That just means if you go to see a movie and you see a combination comedy, drama, horror flick with musical interludes, you're going, what the fuck kind of drugs did I take before I came in here? Some things just don't go together. Peanut butter and chocolate's one thing. Peanut butter and fucking eggs Benedict probably wouldn't work. So that I think he's doing a little bit of everything just because those are the things that he liked. But if you're going to write a song, is it going to be a ballad or a rock anthem or a fucking high tempo or whatever? You can't just, unless you're Meatloaf, you can't put 3 or 4 songs in the same song and make it come out right.
Do you see any Smoky Mountain Wrestling influence on AEW?
I don't know, because it would be hard to tell what a Smoky Mountain Wrestling influence was, because it would have to. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was professional wrestling. It was with different people doing different things and saying different things, but it was of the genre of pro wrestling within the parameters of what was accepted behavior in professional wrestling. So it resembled Mid-South, it resembled Mid-Atlantic, it resembled old Memphis every once in a while, it resembled whatever the fuck, but there wasn't really one style, because we didn't want to reinvent the goddamn wheel. We wanted to do what everybody had done for so many years that nobody was doing anymore. So I don't know if you would obviously be able to say, well, I took X angle from a Smoky Mountain TV show I saw, or a finish or whatever, but not just a style, because it was wrestling.